Welcome to the Sports Marketing Machine podcast. This is the podcast for those working in sports, trying to grow their fan base and sell more tickets. This is the podcast that gives you so much insight to help you level up. Today, super excited to have Ryan Foose from Fooser Sports to talk all things branding. Ryan, got to meet you at the Summer Ball Summit. Great to meet you. We got to talk a lot, but appreciate you coming on. We're going to talk all things about branding today. You ready? Fired up?
I'm very ready, very
All
ready.
right. Well, before we dig into branding and what this is, let's talk a little bit about your background. And you've done so much work from the lacrosse league to minor league baseball, even some help on some major league teams and doing some things across sports. Let's talk a little bit about your background and then we'll dig into the branding side.
Yeah, so it was always known that I wanted to be a designer. I think it was one of the easiest choices I've ever made in my life, and I've told this story quite a bit, and the wife even knows it by heart now. But it was one of those things of graduated undergrad, immediately knew I wanted to go to grad school, and was in a one-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, going, I keep telling everybody I want to do sports design, and yet I haven't done it at all. And took that 2 year span to really just do a deep dive into the industry, whether it was contest or cold calling or doing whatever I needed to do, picking up skills, learning how to truly build a brand. And luckily was able to start Fooser Sports, which then led into a gig with minor league baseball, doing brand development and fanatics, working with MLB and NFL, and now at BetMGM doing more UI work for them. But regardless, it's been an amazing about 10 or 11 year stretch of somehow finding a way to connect that sports side that I've always loved with the design side that I kind of really have a passion for.
So you've been doing this for many years. So my next question is, beyond just the logo, what is a brand?
Yeah, and that's the talk that we were at together.
Yep.
That was my focal point, and it's something that has evolved as I've become older and more experienced. Is there's a misconception by a lot of people of what a brand is. And so I always love to throw out the stat of if you asked 100 owners or fans or players or whomever what makes up a brand, logo is the first thing for 92% of them. They're going to say logo, and it makes total sense. Logo, color, name, because it's on the ticket, it's on the signage, it's on the shirt, it's on the hat, it's everywhere. But there's so many parts to a brand that we never think about. The players themselves are part of the brand. You look at what Inter Miami was, they had one spokesman in the form of a
Hmm.
player in Messi, and now they're the number one followed sports team in North America. Like, it doesn't take much for the brand to get skewed or fall to the wayside because of one small mistake. And you've seen it throughout history of not even in sports but in companies in general about one piece that didn't quite go right, that they posted something on social media that they shouldn't have, that they let go of a spokesman because of actions detrimental to the brand. And so even to the point of an example that I always share of, I can throw out a white piece of cloth with navy pinstripes and everybody knows it's the Yankees, and I didn't have to say anything about what sport we were talking about, whether we were even talking about sports at all. It's kind of within our culture to say if I see white and navy pinstripes, I know it's the Yankees. So I think a lot of the times when I work with clients now, it's not so much from the get-go thinking about, hey, what is this logo going to look like? But it's also thinking about the full lifespan. How are you releasing this brand? What does the merchandise look like? Who do you have on your staff that will work for bilingual or different demographics in your community? Like, there's just a lot of moving pieces that the most successful brands are the ones that go beyond the logo, that they start really redefining what industry they're in. And Savannah bananas are a great example. There are people that love the bananas that do not own a hat, that's maybe never gone to a game. And there's also people that absolutely hate that the bananas are ruining baseball tradition, and
Hmm.
yet they've never gone to a game. They don't own a hat. So it definitely goes much, much further than a jersey, a logo, or even colors.
So when you start talking to teams about rebranding, and this is a great example, you brought up Savannah Bananas, episode 40. I'll put a link in the show notes. I actually interviewed Jared Orton, who's the president, and they had just launched the firefighters, and they
Yep.
came up with that. how many people in their lifetime, or any, even pick a room with 100 people in it, how many people you'd say, hey, what do you think about the firefighters? Zero would say, oh, that's a terrible name, right? So they were very safe in their selection of choosing an alternate identity. But as you start working with teams, what are some things that you ask them? What are some things you dig in as they're like, hey, I'm thinking about launching an alternate identity? What do you ask them to kind of get the ball rolling on it?
The first thing I ask is just about their community and their fans and their city and their ballpark or arena or wherever they're playing at, because I'll do research and I'll dig deep into what we're working on. But at the end of the day, if the people that are on the ground 365 aren't quite sure what these answers are, then we have a much, much bigger issue. So it's always about educating yourself and making sure that you push the right buttons at the right time. And I worked on the Copa program, which is a huge Spanish initiative at minor league baseball. And there's a team that we won't name that was so gung ho of saying, oh, it's going to be a Hispanic program. We're going to be red and green. And yet their market was something like 78% Dominican and Puerto Rican. So if they
Mm-hmm.
would have presented the Mexican colors to a demographic that is overwhelmingly not Mexican, it shows that they didn't quite know what they were getting into. And so that's just a very, very striking example. It's a lot less politically and motivated beyond that, but uh, it's just about first laying the land of what it wants to be. And I think I've also grown it as a designer that at the beginning it was always a matter of how many small details you could put in a logo. And now I kind of laugh at that when you have somebody that redesigns the Carolina Panthers and they go, well, I put South Carolina in the ear and this negative space and all that. I think at the end of the day, that doesn't quite matter. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what secondary logos are for. That's what tertiary logos are for. It's for mottos and promotions and how you market it. And so a lot of the questions just deal with, at the end of the day, who do you want to be? How much fun do you want to be? What parts of this brand are serious? Because especially if you're working with baseball, you're going to have traditionalists that love that like letter cap.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just finding that delicate balance that when we bring everything together and we sketch and we vector it out and we see the embroideries, that every single person in that room feels pride and honor working for it and are really, really excited to go out and sell and tell the story.
So let's go through this exercise here. Let's pretend you and I work together. We came up with a rebrand and we've got it. We've got a good logo. We feel very excited about it. It's going to be an alternate identity. Do you have a checklist? Once you got the logo together, do you have a checklist of, hey, here's how we're going to launch this puppy?
Yeah, in a very, very small nutshell, it's kind of like a three-piece puzzle. The first piece is find kind of the influencers and the insiders that you want to share it with.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of value by going into your neighborhood or your city and saying, hey, we're going to do this. Do you want to see it first? Because every single time people will say yes. And you don't have to share a copy with it. You don't have to get into
Mhm.
NDA weeds. But if you're doing a food identity, how can you get with local folks that might be producing that specialty food item for the city and get their feedback? If you're working with a black initiative, going into that area and saying, hey, this brand is a specialty brand for you guys. We want to make sure that you're involved. And so I think that's huge, is finding the stakeholders
Mhm.
outside of your front office that would be not only excited, but they're going to be the ones that will end up selling your brand better than you ever could. Because
Yep.
if they're on board and they're excited about it, their friends and their family will hear about it and it will grow and grow and grow. The second is, all right, we have all this stuff and it looks good. Do we have merch? It
Mhm.
kills me when there is a release and all eyes are on you and there's no link to a store, there's nothing available, or you go there and there's one single hat and one single shirt. You will never make as much money in a single day as you do that day that it's announced. You're going to make a huge amount of money on opening day. Like
Mhm.
that's going to be a really, really great spot. But that's for you and your region.
Mhm.
There isn't somebody in California that sees something in Florida and is going to show up to a game in order to get it. They're going to see it when it's announced and there's talk about it and there's publicity. So the second part is, do you have merch in a way of taking this brand and giving it to as many people as possible? And then three is really just coming back to what we just discussed is internal knowledge. Why are you going to market it the way you're going to market it? What is the story? How do you make it more entertaining than just, hey, we thought this would be really fun? And so when you get buy-in internally, that starts to show. It starts bringing the energy around. So if you can get that specific demographic for a specialty brand that's really excited about it, you have the merch that's ready, and everybody inside your kind of front office is excited and motivated by it, it can only be successful. I think it's almost impossible with those three things that you will have a flop.
It's such a great point. Do you, when you're interviewing or talking with folks about launching an alternate identity, do you ever ask them to kind of pause on it to say maybe your current brand isn't as strong enough in the community? You ever get into those situations? And that's kind of sticky because you're like almost like, hey, I don't want to work with you. I don't want business because you haven't grown the current brand as it is.
Definitely. So Springfield Lucky Horses is a great example when we were just in Springfield
Uh-huh.
together because their whole identity is based on a horseshoe sandwich, but the main logo is a true horseshoe that 99.9% of the world would recognize. And so it's a delicate balance on saying, hey, make sure they understand your brand before you start going way into the food or way into these other kind of things. And so everything that we did over the last couple of years with them has always kind of been like 1 degree off. So they
Mhm.
became the cheddar monsters for a game. So there's cheddar cheese sauce that's poured over. So it made a connection. So I think that there's a lot of times that it can get confusing to people.
Mhm.
And we see it every time a club does a specialty night. They put it on social media, and the first five comments are, "Is this full time, or is this what? How are we
What's
doing this?"
going on here?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that it's really, really important that your brand still stays strong, your primary brand. Um, but then there's also times where I've worked with clubs, and there's even some projects coming up that are going to get released the next year or so where they go, hey, we had this in our style guide, but we want to emphasize it more and make it more modern or do a throwback version of it. And I always get really hesitant about super small changes that is this making the effort you want? So if you have, let's say you were a minor league baseball team that got their branding in 2005, it could use a little refresh. But if you start just doing it the slightest tweak, most people aren't going to know. They're going to be confused about it. They're going to actually more likely lean towards what they previously had. They're going to go, "Why did you change it? Why was it necessary?" So I think it all comes down to balance. It's probably one of my favorite words is whether it's the symmetrical aspects of it or the balance of it. I think you need to really make sure that what you're producing is different enough and elevate it. There's nothing wrong with testing the waters. I'm surprised that more minor league teams haven't tried that, to be honest, to say, hey, this is what we're going to be on a specialty night with the pure goal of if this goes super well, we're just going to be this full time. I'm surprised that hasn't been kind of a trial period, but I think there's definitely been cases where it's just a matter of are you taking it far enough to be different,
Mhm.
or have you allowed the time for it to kind of settle to make sure that people understand you're still going to be team A? This is just a Friday night type of thing.
Do you ever see teams that take it too far and say, "Hey, I want to release 7 identities," and you're just like, "Wait a minute here."
Yeah, I mean, there we won't name any names, but there's definitely some teams that it feels like every single night they're doing something different. And I think that comes down to do you want to be considered genuine? Do you
Mhm.
want to be considered honest? And so I've worked with quite a few projects where I said, look, if you gain your fandom's trust, they're with you for the long haul. But the average consumer is very, very good at picking up BS.
Mhm.
And you know it from a marketing side. If you produce something that says, "Oh, hey, this is a youth initiative," and then you realize that it's a complete money grab, people are going to be turned off so fast. And so I think the more it happens and the more that people do, and there's some teams that I know this next year have like 12 different identities, which is absolutely insane. To me, that borders on the side of are you doing it because you want to have fun or for a specific initiative, or is this purely a money grab? And I think it's a very, very slippery slope that I would put eggs into baskets that you feel very comfortable with, and not just a, oh heck, let's just do it situation.
Let's talk some success stories because you've had your hand in the Copa jar and helped out. So a lot of the Copa logos that teams see, specifically in minor league baseball, you were the man behind the scenes. And the National Lacrosse League, you just recently helped them with those. Let's talk about some success stories and some of the things that you've learned as you've gone through and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the COPA program is probably what I've been known for the most, and it feels good to finally have some other projects in there that people point to, because the reason I was involved so heavily in our headquarters in minor league baseball was we wanted to remove those boundaries for teams. I don't think it's completely out of line to say we have a very white based front office in sports. I don't even think we need to tie in minor league baseball or baseball in general. It's sports. And so when you come to somebody and go, we want to do something that you might not have any relationship to, whether it's a different race or a tradition or culture, it's a tough situation to be in. So we took on the design side to say, hey, we'll lead with you and work with your community and figure out how we can solve it. And you've seen it in Albuquerque, you've seen it in San Antonio, you've seen it in Eugene, Oregon, that all of a sudden they had maybe 20% of their population was Hispanic and never went to a game because they didn't feel as if there was anything for them. And
Mhm.
one of the biggest kind of stigmas is every single team, doesn't matter what sport and what level, will always have a Hispanic heritage night or a military night or any of these kind of things. And what you're saying, almost subconsciously see is we really, really value you. That's why we're going to give you this night. And that's never should be the case. If you're truly building around your fan base, there should be something about each and every game day that includes all these folks. Everybody should feel invited at a sports game. I don't, we don't need to get political or anything. You should feel as though if you want to come to see my team, why would I not do my best to feel like you're included into this kind of world? And so we had such a great success because you had families that were doing family reunions at the ballpark because they're going, hey, this environment, this branding is about our culture. We think this is so awesome. And Flying Chanclas, I think, sold more in 3 or 4 days than they had like 8 years prior combined. Like it was absolutely insanity. And it was because you're in a Texas town that has a very, very well-known Hispanic culture and heritage, and they weren't doing it to the level that they needed to be, and it has opened doors, and I think they'll never turn back. It will always be forward and doing more and more within those kind of demographics.
So the flying chunkless, for those who don't know, what is that?
A sandal, yeah. Which I'll never forget being in a little conference room at minor league baseball. I think it was actually like our library, which was really just an oversized closet, and we had all these kind of names and comments. They're like, we want to be flying chanclas, and it was just like a sandal that your abuela, grandmother throws at you if you're being a little naughty as a kid. And it took off like wildfire between social media. Sports Illustrated did a story about it immediately. Like it really, really took off because it was something that was so very minor league baseball esque of a flying sandal, and it worked on so many different levels. So I don't think it'd be remotely close to my design Mount Rushmore, but in terms of a brand and how it was level, it would be up there because it did kind of touch on more than just a visual. It was how the food and sounds and environment and full brand kind of came together to surround the folks in San Antonio.
So next time you're watching Encanto and she throws the sandal down down the hall, then the street there, you know exactly what that is. So,
Exactly.
one of which I asked you at the Summer Ball Summit this past summer, the motorboaters. You didn't make that, but what made that so spectacular? In addition to just the silliness of the name.
I I think I think minor league, regardless of sport, because there's been hockey teams and other folks that have kind of pushed the envelope. Uh, I think everybody loves a crude humor joke. Like
Yep.
it is what it is. I mean, I think that there's something about saying something in public you probably shouldn't, and
Hmm.
now there's a team named after it that is so perfect that motorboating is a very much a lake term, and it
Hmm.
also means something wildly different on the side. So
Yep.
I think that both those clubs obviously had success. I mean, I saw it everywhere for about that week-long stretch, and then they did like a collaboration, like handshake post about how we're in this together, just support motorboating, and it's just like, oh my goodness. But I think that's one of those. There's certain things that pop up, especially during specialty brand release time, that you just shake your head and go, I really should have thought something about that. There's something that it's very playful. It doesn't get too down the road of being too far. So I congratulate them for finding that beautiful middle ground.
Yep. That's that balance you were talking about earlier.
Correct.
So if teams are looking for someone that can help teams be very intentional and put together a strategy around their rebrand, a new identity, or even just launching a brand, how do they get in touch with you, Ryan?
Everything is Fooser Sports. So website is foosersports.com. All social media handles are Fooser Sports. So Moose or Goose, but with an F and add in an R at the end. And but I just love talking about brands and the marketing side of things. And you and I probably need to have a more steady balance of calls to just uh, shoot the shit, if you will. But I just really enjoy the fact that there's no more passionate person out there than a sports fan. So if you can talk about brands and how they bring these people together, and if you can get them on your side, it's even better. So uh, even if you're a team out there that just wants to explore a thought, we don't have to even go through the full process. Just to have a chat about it would be awesome to me. But yeah, Fooster Sports everywhere you go.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you coming on. Great to meet you in Springfield. Looking forward to keeping in touch and talking more about branding and marketing and who knows, there may be the next version of the Motorboaters next year that'll bring some more laugh for us. So all good stuff. But appreciate you and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
You got it. All right, I just